The shuttle landed on Prime just as the twin suns began to set. Danny Cole grabbed his bag and stepped onto alien soil for the first time in his life. The air smelled different here. Cleaner somehow, but also strange, like flowers that did not exist on Earth. He looked up at the Imperial Palace and felt very small. The building rose into the sky like a mountain made of glass and silver metal. Towers reached toward the clouds, and bridges connected them like threads of spider silk. Danny had seen pictures, but pictures did not capture how enormous it truly was. An official waited for him at the landing pad. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with silver-blue skin and 4 arms folded across his chest. His eyes were large and golden, and they looked at Danny the way someone might look at an insect that had wandered into their home. "You are the human security consultant," the official said. It was not a question. "That's me," Danny replied. "Danny Cole, nice to meet you." The official did not offer his name. He simply turned and began walking toward the palace. Danny followed, his boots clicking against the polished stone pathway. Inside the palace, everything was even more impressive. The ceilings were so high that Danny could barely see them. Crystal chandeliers floated in the air without any wires or chains, glowing with soft blue light. Nobles walked past in flowing robes, their 4 arms moving gracefully as they spoke to each other. None of them looked at Danny. It was like he was invisible. The official led him through corridor after corridor until they reached a small room near the throne hall. "These are your quarters," the official said. "You will report to Commander tomorrow morning. Do not wander. Do not touch anything. Do not speak unless spoken to." Danny nodded, understood. The official left without another word. Danny sat on the bed, which was too big for him and shaped wrong for a human body, and wondered what he had gotten himself into. He was here as part of a diplomatic exchange program. Humanity had joined the Galactic Coalition only 5 years ago, and they were still considered a minor species. Primitive, young, weak. The Empire was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and they had agreed to accept one human observer at their imperial court. Danny was that human. He had been chosen because of his military background. 10 years in the Marines, 6 combat deployments, 2 Purple Hearts. The diplomats thought his experience would help him understand the security forces. Danny thought they just wanted someone who would not embarrass humanity by complaining about the food or getting lost. The next morning, he reported to Commander as instructed. The commander was even taller than the official from yesterday, with deep scars across his face and arms that spoke of many battles. He wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like polished silver, and he carried himself like someone who had never known fear. "So you are the human," said, circling Danny slowly. "I was told you were a warrior in your world." "I served in my planet's military," Danny said carefully. Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your planet, a single world. We rule over 200 systems. Your entire military would not last an hour against one of our battle fleets." He stopped in front of Danny and leaned down until their faces were close. "You are here because our Empress wishes to show kindness to the lesser species. Nothing more. Do not forget your place." Danny met his gaze without flinching. "I understand, Commander." Something flickered in his golden eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Most beings looked away when he stared at them like that. This human did not. "You will stand guard near the throne room during court sessions," said, straightening up. "A ceremonial position. You will not speak. You will not interfere. You will simply stand there and look presentable." "Yes, Commander." And so Danny's life at the Imperial Palace began. Every day, he stood at his post near the great doors of the throne room, watching as nobles and diplomats came and went. He learned to recognize the different factions at court, the conservatives who supported tradition, the progressives who wanted change, the neutral families who waited to see which way the wind would blow. He also learned about Empress. She was young by standards, barely into adulthood. Her mother had died suddenly 2 years ago, leaving her to rule an empire she was not ready for. The nobles whispered about her behind their hands. Some said she was too soft. Others said she was too inexperienced. A few said worse things, things that Danny pretended not to hear. But when Danny watched her hold court, he saw something different. He saw a young ruler trying her best in an impossible situation. She listened carefully to every petition. She asked thoughtful questions. She made decisions that seemed fair, even when they were unpopular. She was not weak. She was just surrounded by people who wanted her to fail. One afternoon, during a particularly long court session, Empress noticed Danny standing at his post. She paused in the middle of a conversation with one of her advisors and looked at him with those large silver eyes. "You are the human," she said. Danny bowed his head respectfully. "Yes, Your Majesty. I have noticed you watching the court. You observe everything with great attention." She tilted her head slightly. "Why do humans always seem to be watching?" Danny considered his answer carefully. "Because we learned long ago that the universe does not give warnings before it strikes, Your Majesty. If you want to survive, you have to see the danger coming before it arrives." Studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly and returned to her conversation. That night Danny sat in his quarters and thought about what he had seen, the whispers in the corridors, the nervous glances between certain guards, the way some nobles smiled too widely when they spoke to the Empress. Something was wrong at this palace. He could feel it in his bones. He was checking his communication device when he intercepted a coded message on an unsecured channel. He could not translate most of it, but he recognized some words. Military words, attack words, target words. Danny stared at the message for a long time. Something was coming, something bad, and he was just one human in a palace full of aliens who thought he was worthless. But he had made a promise to himself when he took this assignment. He would do his job no matter what. He would protect and serve just like he always had, even if no one expected him to, even if no one wanted him to. Especially then. A week passed, and Danny could not shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The coded message haunted him. He had it to his personal device and studied it every night, trying to make sense of the fragments he could understand. The palace was preparing for the Festival of Ascension, a grand celebration marking Empress' first full year on the throne. Servants rushed through the corridors carrying decorations. Musicians practiced in the great halls. Tailors measured nobles for their ceremonial robes. Everyone seemed excited. Everyone except Danny. He found Ben Harper in the technical wing of the palace, surrounded by screens and equipment. Ben was the only other human at the imperial court, a technical advisor who helped maintain the communication systems. He was a friendly man with a quick smile and sharp eyes that noticed more than people expected. "Danny," Ben said, looking up from his work, "you look terrible. Have you been sleeping?" "Not much." Danny sat down beside him and pulled out his device. "I need your help with something. Can you run this through your translation software?" Ben took the device and studied the message. His smile faded. "Where did you get this?" "Intercepted it on an unsecured channel. I know I probably should not have been listening, but something felt wrong." Ben worked in silence for several minutes, his fingers moving quickly across his keyboard. When he finished, his face had gone pale. "Danny, this is bad, really bad." He pointed to his screen. "Most of it is still encrypted, but I managed to pull out some fragments. Look at this. Attack, Festival, Throne, Crimson Dawn." Danny felt his stomach drop. Crimson Dawn. I have heard that name. They are political extremists, right? Opposed to the Empress. Opposed is putting it mildly. They want her dead. They think she is too weak to rule, too friendly to outsiders. Ben looked at Danny with worried eyes. "They are planning something for the festival. I have to report this." Danny went straight to Commander's office. He explained what he had found, showed him the message, and told him about the translation. listened with a bored expression on his face. "You intercepted a coded transmission that you could not fully translate," said slowly. "And based on a few random words, you believe there is a conspiracy to attack the Empress during the most heavily guarded event of the year." "Yes, Commander. I know it sounds unlikely, but—" "It sounds like a human trying to make himself important." Stood and walked to his window, looking out at the palace grounds. "The Festival of Ascension has been celebrated for 10,000 years without incident. We have guards on every corner, scanners at every entrance, and the finest warriors in the galaxy protecting the throne room. What could a handful of extremists possibly do against that?" "Commander, please, at least increase security. Check the guard rotations. Something is not right." Turned and fixed Danny with a cold stare. "I have commanded the Imperial Guard for 30 years. I do not need a human who has been here for 1 week to tell me how to do my job." He pointed to the door. "Get out, and do not waste my time with this nonsense again." Danny left, his hands shaking with frustration. He wanted to scream, to grab and shake him until he understood, but that would accomplish nothing except getting himself thrown out of the palace. Instead, he decided to investigate on his own. Over the next few days, Danny watched everything more carefully than ever. He tracked supply shipments and noticed strange patterns. Extra crates were being delivered to sections of the palace that did not need supplies. He studied the guard rotations and found gaps, times when certain corridors were left unprotected for several minutes. He followed servants who seemed nervous and guards who whispered to each other when they thought no one was looking. Something was very wrong. He could feel it. On the evening before the festival, Empress summoned him to her private chambers. Danny had never been inside before. The room was beautiful, filled with soft lights and delicate artwork, but it also felt lonely. Too big for one person. "You may speak freely here," said. She sat by a window, looking out at the night sky. "I have noticed you watching the court with more care than anyone else. You see things that others miss." Danny hesitated. Could he trust her? Could he trust anyone in this palace? But looking at her face, he saw the same worry that he felt. She knew something was wrong too. She just did not know what. "Your Majesty, I believe there is going to be an attack during the festival tomorrow. The Crimson Dawn is planning something. I have evidence, but Commander will not listen to me." Listened as he explained everything. The intercepted message, the strange supply deliveries, the gaps in security. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "I believe you," she said finally, "but I cannot act on unverified intelligence. If I accused my own guards of conspiracy without proof, it would tear the court apart." She stood and walked toward him. "Continue watching. If you find anything more concrete, come to me immediately. I will listen." "Thank you, Your Majesty." As Danny turned to leave, he saw Lady standing in the corridor outside. She was a high-ranking noble, cousin to the Empress, always smiling and always supportive in public. But when she saw Danny coming out of his private chambers, her smile disappeared for just a moment. Her eyes went cold and hard. Then the smile returned, and she walked away without a word. That night Danny could not sleep. He wandered the palace corridors, checking and rechecking the security systems, and that was when he found it. 3 sections of the internal defense grid had been quietly disabled. The systems showed green, showed everything was working perfectly, but when Danny looked closer, he saw the truth. Someone had bypassed them from the inside. The attack was not just coming, it was already here. The enemy was already inside the walls. And the festival would begin in just a few hours. The Festival of Ascension was the most beautiful thing Danny had ever seen. The throne room was filled with thousands of floating lights that changed color with the music. Nobles from across the empire wore their finest robes, silk and gold and precious gems shining under the gentle glow. Diplomats from 100 different species mingled and talked, their voices creating a constant hum of conversation. Empress sat on her throne, dressed in ceremonial white that made her silver-blue skin glow like moonlight. She smiled and nodded at her guests, accepting their congratulations and well wishes with grace. But Danny could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew something was wrong, even if she did not know exactly what. Danny stood at his usual post near the great doors, watching everything. He had his sidearm hidden under his formal jacket. Technically, he was not supposed to carry a weapon during ceremonial events, but he had stopped caring about rules. The celebration went on for hours. Speeches were given. Toasts were made. Musicians played songs that were older than human civilization. And through it all, Danny watched and waited, his heart beating faster with every passing minute. It happened during the midnight ceremony. The lights flickered, the music stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the explosions began. The outer corridors erupted in fire and chaos. Danny heard screaming, shouting, the sharp crack of energy weapons being fired. The great doors of the throne room shook as something heavy slammed against them from the outside. "Protect the Empress," Commander shouted, drawing his blade. His guards formed a wall in front of the throne, their weapons ready. All civilians moved to the emergency exits. Nobles and diplomats ran in every direction, pushing and shoving in their panic to escape. Danny pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay out of the way while keeping his eyes on the throne. The doors exploded inward. Armed figures poured into the throne room, wearing the red and black colors of the Crimson Dawn. They fired into the crowd without mercy, cutting down anyone who got in their way. Danny saw 3 nobles fall in the first seconds, their beautiful robes stained with blood. Charged forward with his guards, meeting the attackers head-on. For a moment, it looked like they might hold the line. The Imperial Guard were some of the finest warriors in the galaxy, and they fought with desperate courage. Then the second wave hit. They came from inside the throne room itself. A dozen guards suddenly turned on their brothers, revealing themselves as traitors. They struck from behind, catching the loyal guards completely by surprise. Barely avoided a blade that was aimed at his back, spinning around with a roar of fury. The line broke. "Fall back," shouted. "Protect the Empress. Retreat to the secondary position." But there was no secondary position. The attackers had planned too well. Every escape route was blocked. Every backup plan had been countered. The traitors had been inside the palace for months, learning every secret, preparing for this moment. Looked at the chaos around him and made a decision. "All guards, retreat. We will regroup outside and launch a counterattack." "Commander, what about the Empress?" one of his lieutenants asked. "We cannot reach her. There are too many of them. We will come back with reinforcements." And just like that, the Imperial Guard began to run. The finest warriors in the galaxy, the sworn protectors of the throne, turned their backs and fled through a side passage that the attackers had not yet blocked. Nobles and diplomats followed them, desperate to escape the slaughter. In seconds, the throne room was nearly empty. Empress stood alone on the steps of her throne, watching as her protectors abandoned her. Her face was calm, but Danny could see the fear in her eyes. She knew what was coming. She knew she was about to die. The attackers advanced slowly now, savoring their victory. There were at least 50 of them, armed with blades and energy weapons, their faces twisted with hatred and triumph. At their head walked a tall with deep scars across his face, even worse than. This was the leader of the Crimson Dawn. "Little Empress," said, his voice dripping with contempt, "your guards have abandoned you, your nobles have fled, you stand alone." He raised his blade. "Any last words before I take what should have been mine?" "She is not alone." Danny stepped forward, putting himself between the Empress and the attackers. His hand was steady as he drew his sidearm. His heart was pounding, but his voice was calm. 50 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. 50 warriors, each one bigger and stronger than him, armed with weapons that could cut through steel like paper. Stared at Danny for a long moment. Then he started to laugh. A human, this is your last defender. One small, weak human against all of us. He laughed harder and his soldiers joined in. This is too perfect. The mighty empress of thee, protected by the lowest creature in the galaxy. Human said softly from behind him, you should go, you do not have to die for me. Danny did not turn around. He kept his eyes on the army of killers standing between them and any hope of survival. Your Majesty, he said quietly, where I come from we do not leave people behind just because the odds are bad. We do not run when things get hard. We stand and fight, even when we know we cannot win. He took a deep breath. I am not going anywhere. Stopped laughing. Something changed in his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but something like confusion. He did not understand this human who refused to run. Kill him, ordered. Kill him first, make it slow. A group of soldiers moved forward, blades raised. Danny fired. The first shot hit the lead soldier in the chest, dropping him instantly. The second and third shots took down two more before they could react. Danny moved to the side, putting a pillar between himself and the main group, using every bit of cover the throne room offered. The battle for the throne had begun. Danny had been in bad situations before. He had fought in wars on 3 different continents, survived ambushes and explosions, and watched friends die beside him. But he had never faced anything like this. 50 enemies, 1 sidearm, and an empress he had sworn to protect. He fired from behind the pillar, taking down another soldier before ducking back as energy bolts scorched the stone beside his head. The Crimson Dawn fighters were spreading out now, trying to surround him. They were angry. They had expected easy prey, not a fight. The tables, called out from behind him. The ceremonial tables are reinforced with metal. They will provide better cover. Danny ran, sliding across the polished floor and flipping a heavy table onto its side. Energy bolts hit the metal surface and bounced away. Was right. He was lucky she knew her own throne room so well. 3 soldiers charged his position. Danny shot the first one, then had to roll aside as the other 2 swung their blades at him. He was not faster than them. He was not stronger. But he had something they did not expect. He had spent his whole life training to fight against bigger, stronger enemies. He ducked under a swing, grabbed the attacker's arm, and used the alien's own weight to throw him into his companion. While they were tangled together, Danny put 2 bullets into them and moved to new cover. He is just one human, shouted, finish him. More soldiers came. Danny fought like a man possessed. He used every trick he had ever learned, every dirty tactic, every desperate move. He shot them when he could and fought hand-to-hand when he could not. The throne room became a maze of overturned furniture and fallen bodies. But he was taking damage too. A blade caught his shoulder, opening a deep cut. An energy bolt grazed his leg, burning through his clothes and scorching the skin beneath. He was bleeding from a dozen small wounds, his body screaming at him to stop, to rest, to give up. He did not stop. Human said. She had moved closer to him, using the chaos to stay near his protection. Her voice was filled with wonder. Why do you keep fighting? You must know you cannot win. Danny reloaded his weapon with bloody fingers. I do not need to win, Your Majesty. I just need to hold them long enough. Long enough for what? Long enough for someone out there to remember their duty. Outside the palace, Commander stood with his remaining guards, organizing a perimeter around the building. His plan was to wait for reinforcements from the orbital defense fleet, then launch a coordinated counterattack. It was a sound military strategy. It was exactly what he had been trained to do. But something felt wrong. Ben Harper pushed through the crowd of refugees and grabbed his arm. Commander, Danny is still in there. Pulled his arm away. The human, he should have retreated with everyone else. He did not retreat, he stayed. He is in there right now alone, protecting the Empress. Ben's eyes were wild with fear and anger. You left her. You all left her. and one human stayed behind to do your job. His face changed. The anger and pride drained away, replaced by something that might have been shame. "That is impossible," he said quietly. "No one could survive against that many enemies alone." "Then go back and help him." Inside the throne room, Danny was running out of ammunition. He had killed or wounded more than 20 attackers, but more kept coming. His body was failing him. His vision was blurring from blood loss. Every breath felt like fire in his chest. Pushed through his soldiers, tired of waiting. He was bigger than the others, stronger, and he carried a massive blade that hummed with energy. His scars twisted as he smiled. "Enough games, human. You have fought well, better than I expected, but this ends now." Danny raised his weapon, but it clicked empty. He threw it aside and picked up a fallen blade from the floor. It was too heavy for him, designed for hands, but it was all he had. "Still fighting," laughed. "You cannot even lift that blade properly." "I can lift it enough." They fought. Danny blocked the first strike, but the impact nearly broke his arms. He dodged the second, stumbled, and barely avoided the third. Was too fast, too strong, too skilled. Danny knew he could not beat him. He had known that from the beginning. But every second he stayed alive was another second. The Empress survived. His blade finally caught Danny across the chest, opening a deep wound that dropped him to his knees. Blood poured down his body, pooling on the floor beneath him. The world was growing dark at the edges. "Any last words, human?" Raised his blade for the killing blow. Danny looked up at him, his eyes still burning with defiance even as his body failed. "Yeah, you should have brought more soldiers." Frowned, confused. Then the throne room doors exploded inward for the second time that night. Commander charged through the smoke, his blade flashing, his voice raised in a battle cry that shook the walls. Behind him came his guards, the ones who had run, now returning with fury and shame driving them forward. They had seen the truth. They had seen one human do what they should have done, and they could not live with that shame. The battle turned in an instant. The Crimson Dawn soldiers, already worn down from fighting Danny, were overwhelmed by the fresh wave of Imperial guards. Tried to rally his forces, but it was too late. The tide had turned. Danny collapsed on the floor, his eyes closing, his job finally done. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Empress kneeling beside him, her silver hands pressed against his wounds, her voice calling his name. Danny drifted in and out of darkness for what felt like forever. Sometimes he heard voices, soft and worried, speaking in languages he did not understand. Sometimes he felt hands on his body, cold and gentle, and strange machines humming beside him. Sometimes he dreamed of home, of Earth, of faces he had not seen in years. When he finally opened his eyes, he was in a white room filled with soft light. Medical equipment floated around his bed, monitoring his vital signs with quiet beeps and flashes. His whole body hurt, but it was a distant pain, dulled by whatever drugs they had given him. Empress sat beside his bed, watching him. "You are awake," she said. Her voice was quiet, relieved. There were dark circles under her silver eyes as if she had not slept in days. "How long?" Danny asked. His throat was dry and his voice came out as a rough whisper. 3 days. The medics were not sure you would survive. Our technology is designed for bodies, not human ones. They had to adapt everything." She paused, and something like a smile crossed her face. "They told me you are surprisingly difficult to kill." Danny tried to laugh, but it turned into a cough. "I have heard that before." Leaned closer. "The galaxy is talking about what you did. News has spread across every system in the coalition. The human who stood alone against an army, the human who protected the throne when everyone else ran." Her eyes met his. "You have become famous, Danny Cole." "I did not do it for fame." "I know, that is what makes it remarkable." Over the next few days, Danny learned what had happened after he fell. Commander and his guards had defeated the remaining Crimson Dawn soldiers. had been captured alive and was now awaiting trial. The traitors within the palace guard had been identified and arrested, along with their supporters among the noble families. And Lady, the Empress's own cousin, had been revealed as the mastermind behind everything. She had been feeding information to the Crimson Dawn for months, helping them plan the attack, manipulating the guard rotations to create openings in the security. Her goal had been to kill and claim the throne for herself. When Danny heard this, he thought about the cold look in his eyes when she saw him leaving the Empress's chambers. She had known then that he was a threat to her plans. She had underestimated him, just like everyone else had. She thought humans were too primitive to be dangerous, said when Danny asked about it. She dismissed you as irrelevant. That was her mistake. Commander came to visit Danny in the medical ward. The proud warrior stood at the foot of Danny's bed for a long time without speaking. His face was tight with emotions that Danny could not quite read. I was wrong about you, finally said. The words seemed to cost him great effort. I called you weak. I called you unimportant. I said you did not belong here. He paused, his golden eyes meeting Danny's. I was wrong. You have more honor than any guard I have ever served with. When my soldiers and I ran, you stayed. You did what we should have done. Danny shook his head slowly. You came back, that is what matters. We came back because of you, because we saw a human doing our duty while we fled in shame. Straightened up and pressed his right hand to his chest in what Danny recognized as a salute of deep respect. You have my gratitude, Danny Cole, and my apology. After left, Danny lay in his bed and thought about everything that had happened. He had come to Prime as a minor diplomat, a token human in a galaxy that did not take humanity seriously. He had expected to stand in corners and be ignored for a year before going home. Instead, he had changed everything. When Danny was finally well enough to leave the medical ward, Empress summoned him to her private chambers. She stood by the same window where they had spoken before the festival, looking out at the imperial city below. The Empire is officially requesting a deeper alliance with humanity, she said without turning around. Our diplomats are already in contact with your leaders. There will be trade agreements, technology exchanges, military cooperation, things that would have taken decades to achieve, accomplished in weeks. She turned to face him. Because of you. Danny shifted uncomfortably. He still was not used to being the center of attention. I just did what anyone would have done. No, that is not true. Walked toward him, her forearms folded in a gesture that he had learned meant deep sincerity. Anyone would have run. Any reasonable being would have calculated the odds and decided that survival was more important than sacrifice. You did not. You stood and fought when there was no logical reason to do so. She stopped in front of him. I have thought about this for many days. I have asked myself why you did it, and I think I finally understand. What do you understand? That humans are not weak, they are not primitive, they are simply quiet about their strength. Her silver eyes held his. You do not need to prove yourselves because you have nothing to prove. You know what you are capable of, even when no one else does. And when the moment comes, when everything seems hopeless, you stand up and show the universe what you truly are. Danny did not know what to say to that. He had never thought about humanity that way. He had just done what felt right. I would like to offer you a position, continued, not as an exchange officer, not as a token human, as my personal protector, someone I can trust absolutely because you have already proven yourself when it mattered most. She paused. Will you stay? Danny thought about home. He thought about Earth, about the life he had left behind. He thought about everything he had been through and everything that might come next. Then he nodded. I will stay. The galaxy was changing. Other species were starting to look at humans differently now, not as primitives to be ignored, but as something unexpected, something valuable, something unbreakable. In the throne room of the Empire, Danny Cole stood beside the throne, no longer invisible, as Empress addressed her people and the galaxy beyond. He was just one human, one small figure among giants, but he had shown everyone what that meant. When the guards ran, the humans stayed. And nothing would ever be the same.